Okay, welcome back to the Digital Culture Ideas YouTube show and podcast. I'm Hils Walton, your host, and today with me is Matt BAin. So Matt is a marketing futurist with a track record of success in driving growth and engagement through innovative marketing approaches that combine brand, technology, data, and design. So very, very now. He's also the marketing and AI director of Sparks, which is a New Zealand telco. So Matt has worked with some really, really big brands in the past. He's worked for the likes of Nike, Hermes, Dior, Oakley, Tommy Hilfiger, Rolls-Royce. The list goes on here. Ferrari, Lamborghini, all of the big brands like Heineken, Johnny Walker. So there's a wealth of experience here, and I'm really keen to tap into some of that today with Matt. So Matt, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Listen, I'd like to start these podcasts by just giving people a feel for who you are, a little bit of your origin story. Can you tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. So I'm sitting here in Auckland in Spark New Zealand offices, born and bred in this part of the world, but moved to Europe quite early, mainly to pursue studies. Moved to London Business School to their PhD department and got into big data, building predictive models, working with brands to understand what the future might look like around data and digital back in kind of 98, showing my age time. And from there, rolled into, I guess my career is more of a journey and an adventure than a plan. So I ended up at Embassy Saatchi as they were setting up digital capabilities in the UK and London. Largely doing due diligence as an analyst on business plans because .com boom, every brand had a plan to build something digital. And that was an introduction into kind of traditional ad planning and how a traditional agency works, but working in the digital end of that, which was useful. And that was cool until the .com crash happened. And so everything died up at that point. And then there was a big decision, right? Do you stay in digital? A lot of people piled out and said, this isn't a thing anymore. But I've based a lot of my thinking around what's inevitable, and it seemed to me inevitable that digital was going to be a big thing and that it was going to be interesting and challenging. And so stayed in that part of the industry, moved into kind of bigger businesses like Digitas, which is an American business, and then ended up at a place called AKQA, which was one of the leaders in its field at the time and represented a lot of the big brands you spoke about, right? So was responsible for helping lead those brands into a digital future, create platforms that serve their customers and help drive their business forward. So after 13 years there and 20 years in Europe, I answered the call of Spark. And so I'm back here.
And so in terms of the technology parts of what you've done, how did you pick up your technology prowess? Was that just being immersed in it and working alongside people?
Just need. So I've had a data and kind of strategic background. But when you're building, so, we rolled out Nike Plus globally for Nike. When you're building, maintaining and operating those large platforms, which didn't used to happen inside businesses back then, a lot of that was outsourced. Then you have large technical teams, you become really familiar with how technology works, is built, how to make it work properly. And so I think by accident, I ended up with a grounding in not just the data side, but also the technology side and the creative design part of the market. So I guess the intersection of those three areas is where I've been operating for the last 20 years or so.
It's interesting you said you couldn't have kind of planned out your career. It's kind of happened along the way. Is there any advice that you would give to someone starting out in marketing or just lessons you've learned throughout your career that you think someone else might benefit from?
Yeah, I'm a massive, there's often two schools of thought, like, do you become a generalist or a specialist? And I've always thought being a specialist, those are the people that have always inspired me, people with a unique view on the world, with world-class craft and the ability to deliver kind of unreasonable results by having unreasonable expectations of their craft. And so I would always, I tell this to the young people that join my team, choose something you want to be the best in New Zealand or the best in the world at, and aim for that. And that will take you a long way. And then you can decide to broaden out from there. And it allows you to deliver an order of magnitude more value more quickly than having a more general trying to cover all the bases. I think at a smaller company, maybe that's more difficult, but that's the advice I give people that join our organization. And that it also frames up, like, to become the best in the world, what does that look like? It gives people a vivid description of what that would require.
That's really interesting, because you're almost talking to your team's culture a wee bit there as well. And, perhaps that's, how you've been able to achieve so many great results as well.
Yeah, I mean, having worked with some of the brands you mentioned, while Spark won't be a Nike, or a Rolls Royce, the craft that we have internally should mean that anyone that left here went to, your business or, a global leading brand should fit straight into that team and be of a high standard. And so I think that there's a difference between what the business stands for in market and the craft that exists within it. And that's why I think about it with my teams.
That's very cool. And when you think of marketing and AI and everything that's going on at the moment, like, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you think marketers are facing right now when it comes to particularly implementing AI?
It's thinking far forward enough, right? And so when you have a technology like AI, which is in its infancy but moving really quickly, to be able to have a goal, it needs to be an audacious goal with a description. Like, it has to survive the ambiguity of what's going to happen in the next 12, 18 months.
Yeah.
And so thinking big enough and leaning into what's inevitable, if you think 5 or 10 years out and work back from that, I think is something which you don't hear enough. And it means that people they don't get started, or they have low expectations, or they get started and something changes and go, it's not relevant anymore. Right. So in our business, when we 4 years ago started getting into AI, we said our vision is that our advertising feels like a service. Right. And to make that customers feel that way, we have to be able to predict what their needs are, understand them to a point that we can personalize at an individual level, have channels that can deliver in real time against those insights. And we started that 4 years ago. We still haven't finished, right? That's a really enduring, big, hairy, audacious goal that stands the test of time. It is inspiring, but also ladders down to some really actionable things that need to happen.
Do you think marketers are sort of pivoting at the moment in terms of how AI is impacting their work?
I think they're reacting, I'd say.
Okay.
Very few marketers I come across have a plan for how to deal with this. And it's new, but it's not insignificant in its impact to our field. And so I think that the challenge is we sit in a little marketing bubble and look at the way things have always been done.
Yeah.
And we don't look more broadly at what's the broad macro capabilities and changes that are happening across every industry. How does it impact us? And what's the bits we need to get started on now? And I think that means looking at, global startups. So Netflix, Spotify, how do they do personalization? What principles do they use to make sure that they disrupt the way that content's delivered? I think there's not enough of that still. There's still a lot of traditional metrics, traditional capabilities doing the same thing over and over in an environment which is changing exponentially all around us.
And so is that part of your plan then, looking to the horizon, trying to pick those trends and kind of experiment and try things out? What's your plan? Yeah. What plan would you give us?
There's two ways we think about this, right? One is incremental improvement. So with my team, we go, there's some stuff which we need to get up and get 1% better every day. All right. Yeah. And that's around our craft, the systems we have, the capabilities we currently have. You can lead out an incremental. And then we always have a section in our plan, which is what's the moonshots, what's the 10x bets that if we placed and they came off would step change that part of our capability. And then we go ahead with both those things. And so I think a lot of businesses look at the incremental and they don't factor in the big disruptive things that might be coming that actually you want to have your eyes up on and be ahead of the game on, because that's where competitive advantage comes happen, kind of is best felt, I think. And there's also I tell my team, like, disruption, we're in a disruptive environment now, right? The dot-com boom was one. This is that on steroids. And disruption feels good if you're riding the wave and you're getting ahead of it. It feels pretty bad if it's been done to you, right? Yes. Which is where you end up if you don't get ahead of it. So it's about understanding. I mean, the metaverse was one of those things everyone got excited about, never happened, right? Well, it's in,
doesn't mean it won't happen.
It's here in gaming, but it's not what people thought. Maybe it will.
Yeah.
I think it's being prepared to have those thoughts, play some small bets, and then quickly fail them if you go, no, that's noise, that's not signal. And then when you get on something like generative AI, which is much more like signal than noise, being able to double down on that. So start small and scale fast. That's kind of the way we think about that. Yeah.
And so if you were thinking about, I mean, because basically you've done this at Spark, but if you were thinking about implementing AI into a business, say even just like an ordinary business, like what would be your steps? What would you be thinking of?
So
we're getting practical now for the...
Yeah. So 4 years ago when we started this at Spark, we were thinking about how can we use structured data and predictive analytics, right? So machine learning models that can predict when a customer's in the market and what they want, and then trigger a system to act on that, and then learn from that, right? So reinforced learning, so that every interaction creates a better experience for the next customer. Traditionally, that's been quite an intensive and scale capability, right? Big businesses could do it, like the Netflixes of the world, but it's hard for smaller businesses to do. So generative AI is quite different. Unstructured data being democratized much faster, right, than that more predictive capability has, and requires smaller data sets to train on to get results. So I think that's where, if you haven't started yet, that's the place probably to look at and go, how do we start to get our heads around how generative AI can help our business, given that it's the most accessible to date. Doesn't mean you don't have to also think about the predictive analytics, but in terms of just getting started. Before you get started, go through the same process we went through, which was we need a set of ethical guidelines that our teams and our customers understand that will steer the way that we use this capability, because if you get it wrong, it can be really bad for your customers and your business, right? So if you need a starter for 10, we published ours on our website several years ago, so you can download ours as a starting point. But that's really important, because ethical guidelines aren't GDPR. They are not, your current market's legal requirements. They are, what do we think as a brand is an appropriate way for us to use this to serve our customers, and what's not. So that's a starting point, and that's a moat, right? So you get that stuff right, it's foundational, it allows you to go faster. You don't have to come back and do that later. Really important to get that done stuff up front. And the next step is, right, we've got that. What is the information we hold on our customers? If you're looking at customer, and we're marketing, it will be mainly our customer data, right? So what's the personally identifiable data we hold? Are we clear already in our privacy policies that our customers know what we collect and why we collect it from them and how we use it? So again, we went through a process of reviewing all that stuff, going, this wasn't initially intended when we first published it for AI, it was intended for other purposes. Now the purposes change, we must review what we're collecting, why, and how we explain that to our customers. And then, in that process, you'll find you hold data that you shouldn't hold, or you don't need to hold, or that can create bias if you're going to train a model. So, we don't hold gender information because that's something we might have traditionally collected, but actually it's really bad to build that into a model because you start to build bias in at the root. And then, so you remove that, clean your data, and then I guess the final point around generative AI is be really aware of where this data goes if you put it into a model, right, into a platform. You probably don't want to be putting that stuff into public environments where public models can be trained or have access to that data. You need to make sure that it's inside your secure environment, the same as you hold the data now. So that's probably the final point of, it's fine to go and ask questions of the market in, ChatGPT or Bard, but we would never allow people to feed any of our commercial or customer data into those public environments. And that's the bedrock of now we can start going fast and experimenting because we've got the basics in place. We're keeping our customers safe, and we're being responsible about how we run the business on the data we've got.
How do you get the business to buy into doing AI? Like sometimes, you obviously, you've been playing in that space for a while. You sort of knew this was something that the business need to focus on, but you've got to obviously get the enterprise to buy into that as well. Was there any challenges or anything you had to do in that space to kind of get the organization to invest? Because it's all about experimenting until it's kind of proven, but actually you need to invest a bit. And what's some advice for organizations that are trying to get the organization to invest in this?
Yeah, so it's top down and bottom up, right? So ideally you get all the exec aligned and they go, this is important. We need to make this a priority, or one of our priorities, align and go. That's not always possible in various businesses. So another approach is put it on the radar of the exec and do some experimentation. The best way to predict the future in these areas is kind of to create it in a lot of ways because of the ambiguity. And particularly with generative AI, there's no excuse for everyone getting on the tools. So if you don't have Copilot in your business, then you've got access to public tools.
Yeah.
People don't naturally change the way they work, right? It's we've found you need a forcing mechanism. So having goals that force people to use AI to deliver what they have to deliver because it's more efficient is some of the things we do. So there's an element of training we do and making people aware of the opportunities. We make sure they've got the tools they need, and then we make sure that there's some pressure to use them.
Can I dig into, you said to start with that what's sometimes the best way to predict the future is to create it?
Yeah.
I've never heard that phrase like that before. What did you mean? Can you describe that a bit more?
So if there's ambiguity and you don't know what a particular technology can do in your business and you're unwilling to experiment, you won't find out until someone else has done it. And by definition, you're a follower, and behind. And so if you go, it's inevitable that AI is going to be really important to our people, the way they do their work and turning up for our customers in the right way in the future. But we don't know exactly what that looks like because no one's done it yet that we know of in the way we want to do it. Then there's an opportunity to be the first, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then you're the master of your own destiny. That's the whole thing of it's not like, well, one of our competitors suddenly has implemented AI and has this capability we don't have and can deliver more for our customers, for their customers than we can for ours. Whereas if you create the conditions for you guys to experiment and do that, then you create the opportunity for your business, is the way we think about it.
Yeah. So you sort of, creating the future, but also creating the plan as you go.
Yeah.
Experimenting. That's very cool. So you call yourself a marketing futurist. I love that. So I'm really keen to tap into some of the things you're seeing on the horizon in terms of marketing or AI. What are some of the kind of really out there signals or trends that you think could be coming that might be useful for people to know about?
I think in the short term, it's very much AI. I mean, that's the big thing right now, right? And it builds on a lot of technology that businesses like ours have invested in the past. But if we can, the way we think about it is if we can ship new experiences faster to our customers, like new, better ones, if they can be more personalized, then you start to shift marketing economics, right? So the things like the cost of acquisition or the lifetime value of a customer or the churn rate starts to be dictated in an industry by who's ahead in those areas. So in the short term, I think the big trend is how do you get more efficient and effective with what you do using the technology? In the longer term, I think there'll be some more macro changes. So it's probable that everyone will adopt this and therefore it stops being something differentiating. It becomes table stakes. You have to have this. Then I think I think about that as the what. Then the how becomes more important, right? So a brand, the way a brand shows up and how this technology serves you becomes even more powerful. The differentiator might become more about how this business makes you feel than just the rational functional things that it can do when you engage with it. And so I don't know how that will play out, but that's my feeling. That's what people talk to my team about at the moment is how does this play out? How does a chatbot talk to you in the future? Because if they all talk the same and your one is more empathetic or is more optimistic, then there's a nuance to that which might be really powerful.
So it's like almost like how you make people a fan of a business or a brand.
Yeah.
Not just receiving the services and consuming
I mean,
more.
taking friction out is going to become, that's where this will go first, right? How do you take the friction out of the day-to-day experience a customer or someone that's working in the business has, right? So how does this take away the stuff that's annoying? I think is usually the first stuff to move. And then it's how do we surprise and delight customers on top of that base functionality?
Yeah. So you obviously receive various signals that you're kind of looking at. How do you stay up to date? Because I think everyone's trying to keep up with all the technology and AI trends in particular, but are there any particular sources or places you go to keep up to date?
Yeah, not the marketing, not so much the marketing literature or marketing publications. So, when I arrived here, I'd been working with the McLaren Formula One team and was seeing the way that they were using digital twins to innovate the speed of a Formula One car at pace, right? So all of the development was done on a sim and then quite rapidly deployed into the car, knowing that the sim was a good representation of the car. And so, we spoke about what would a digital twin of a telco look like? How would you start to improve the pace of innovation by automating a lot of the things that are currently manual and predicting outcomes before you actually built a product or a service or a new capability. So that's typical of how we think about things when we look, whether it's in the medical field or engineering or automotive. We tend to look for what's stuff that's making a big impact outside of our industry, and if we brought that in, how might we apply it to our industry in a way that would change the way we think about things and put us ahead of the market.
And so so then your advice to businesses in that space might be to look to other industries then actually.
Yeah, and I follow people, venture capitalists globally are always looking at these things, right? So if you listen to podcasts that they do or read their blogs or look at what new startups are popping up, why are they being funded? What's the insight around the technology they've got that's making them fundable by smart people? That's often where the magic is. And it's very future facing. It's Horizon 3 and gives you a feel for what's coming down the pipeline. And so I think that for me is the places I look for what's next, not necessarily what's happening in telco, other telcos are doing or what marketers are doing. It can be, you have to take that as well, but that's kind of everyone's doing that, right? So that's not going to give you divergent thinking from what all your competitors are doing. The divergent thinking comes from the outside in stuff, which is beyond marketing and beyond a particular industry. That's where you're going to find new stuff.
Obviously this is the Digital Culture Ideas podcast, and I think if we think of the number of tech changes that are happening and really trying to, you talked about bringing people on the tech and the AI journey. What do you think having that digital culture in an organization means, and any other tips or strategies for organizations needing to do that?
Yeah, I personally don't use the word digital because it's the dominant channel to market. It's the dominant technology that all of our people use all day, every day, right? And so it's a bit like I don't know, people talk about gamers. Like gamers, there's more gamers than people that watch TV. People don't say, are you a TV watcher? But they say, are you a gamer? I think we've got to move beyond this having digital roles. I think if you talk about digital as a separate thing, you kind of make out that it's not already deeply embedded in a business. So I think the challenge is, how do you set unreasonable goals as a business and as a team that can only be achieved by a technological leap? Right, to force people to consider non-linear approaches to using technology and what we traditionally call digital channels to achieve things, and and particularly new people coming to the workforce, like digital is just, they've grown up with it, right?
It's just as the
Yeah, they've
workplace.
never seen a tape deck before and don't know what a record player looks like. And so digital is just, it's strange to talk about that for them because it's everything. And therefore, I think focusing more on innovation, step change, what's an unreasonable outcome? What would it look like? And then if you work that back, what would be required to make that happen? And usually that requires technology, people, processes, and data to come together in a unique way. So that's the way I kind of think about that.
That's interesting. I talk a lot about the fact that there's no traditional organizations and technology organizations. There's just organizations. Like, it's just the thing that we all have now. And even I talk about kind of technical and non-technical. And as you said, digital natives, everyone's growing up with phones and AI and computers. Like, it's pretty standard that technology's part of our lives. And I think in the metaverse, they sort of talk about there's no kind of the physical and the digital. It's actually all one experience, to be honest. So maybe I need to change the name of my podcast.
No, I wasn't heading with the name. I think, if you go into a business and you go, this is our head of digital, then does that mean it's no one else's job?
Yeah.
And so I'm a little bit like, if you make it a thing over there, then you take it out of the hands of the people who should be taking it for granted that that's the future and leaning into it. So it's a little bit of a mindset thing, I think.
True. Speaking of phones, what are the sort of top apps on your home screen that you use? Just a little question I like to ask people. Always a bit curious.
I'm one of these like folder guys, so I have more folders.
Oh, you are? Yeah.
Yeah. So
and then you use the search bar? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I use the search bar. And so for me, but I think in groups it would be social apps, which I limit myself to an hour a day. I think it needs to go to 30 minutes. Probably, because now is too long to spend on social apps in a day. And then, messenger, music, health and fitness, and then content. And I think I rely on apps a lot to manage, the things I want to achieve. And because your phone's in your pocket all the time, then having, how am I staying healthy today? What's the my AI apps are on there. I use them a lot. I've got questions that I go to the web browser anymore. I go straight to AI and get the answer. So, that's how I think about that. I can't narrow it down to one or two things. So I end up with folders.
That's cool. Have you used the AI apps like as you're walking around and it talks back to you? Have you done it?
No, I don't. I'm not a voice guy. I've heard voices in decline now. Voices in decline now. So maybe I'm ahead of the curve. But no, I never got into voice. I never found it natural enough. I never quite was easy enough. So maybe it's something I need to re-explore. I don't know.
And so, what's going on? Like, what are you looking forward to next? What's coming up for you?
There's a lot of, particularly in marketing, there's a lot of concern about AI, and I think some of that's, natural.
There's a lot of emotion with it as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fear about it taking jobs. And I think quite differently. I go, it was the same when, I guess, typing pools were around and word processors were invented, right? But what I think is there's a huge opportunity here for marketers who are supposed to be customer-centric, strategic, focused on their markets and customers to really do that more, right? So we have AI in our business, which for our base, around 90% of the comms go to our customers now run by AI. So humans don't have to create an email, think about who to send it to, actually send it, decide the channel, all that stuff. That's done for them. We don't have less marketers because of that. Every marketer is more productive now that they can focus more on understanding their customers, thinking about the next product and service we might offer. So I think following that trend, like AI, at least in the short term, is going to take care of a bunch of the busy work and hopefully allow us to have more time to lift and think about the stuff that's more meaningful and be more creative and all that good stuff, the stuff that we're supposed to be doing. So I think that applies to a lot of the parts of the enterprise that you look at. Is the first place that will be hit is the boring menial work that people don't feel that rewarded by doing, but it's a part of the job that have to get done. And therefore the human capital you can release is huge. That's why I think about that. And there's two sides to it. I mean, but I think that's the optimistic view.
Definitely. And actually, as I'm using AI, it's really interesting because you talked about the fact that it's changing your behavior, kind of injecting into the flow of work. Whenever I feel that sense of, oh, I've got to sit down and do this task, I then think to myself, hold on,
Yeah.
maybe there's an AI that can do this for me. Like that's actually a
That's the
key
point of,
trigger for myself.
yeah, when I was talking about forcing people to do it, it's not forcing, but I have to force myself to do it. I'll sit there and go start searching for something, and I'm like, why? Stop. Go in AI. I'm getting better at it now, but I think all of us have to force this behavior. It's not instinctive yet.
No.
But once you do it, you realize the value. Once it becomes a habit, you really start to release, the time that you are spending replying to emails or drafting something. So, yeah, I think it's on all of us to find some forcing mechanism for ourselves to make this a habit. And then you start to get, you start to become experienced with it. Like I'm a much better prompter of Google than my mum is, only because I've used it more, and I get better results in here. And it's exactly the same with AI. Like get on the tools, get an understanding of what it's good at and what it's not, and how to get the best out of it. That's kind of my mission for myself at the moment and for the rest of the team.
Awesome. I love it. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been awesome chatting to you about all things marketing and AI and getting to know you a bit better as well. So I really appreciate it.